My name is Evelyn Shaw. I am 38 years old, a United States Army colonel, and the mother of twins. But on the night my marriage ended, nobody in that ballroom knew my rank. They saw only a tired woman who was 8 months pregnant. They watched my husband praise his mistress for saving her parents' home with money stolen from my combat pay account. His mother wore an emerald brooch bought with the same money. 3 nights later, my babies nearly died during emergency surgery, while my husband ignored every call from the hospital. Then he appeared beside my bed, handed me divorce papers, and called me useless. He believed I had nothing. He did not know that I controlled the defense contract that could make him rich. He did not know I had already found his forged signature. And he certainly did not know that, before I signed my name on anything, I was going to take apart the empire he had built from my work. The night it began, the Hawthorne Club in Washington, D.C., was crowded with executives, defense contractors, lobbyists, and their elegantly dressed spouses. Crystal glasses chimed beneath golden chandeliers. A jazz band played near the dance floor. Everything looked polished and respectable. Nothing about my marriage was respectable anymore. My husband, Daniel Thorne, stood at the podium in a tailored black tuxedo. Beside him stood Vanessa Cole, his so-called vice president of operations. She wore a bright red dress and the smile of a woman who believed she had already won. Daniel lifted his glass. Vanessa understands loyalty, he told the room. When her parents were about to lose their home, she worked hard and paid off their mortgage. And that is the kind of courage we value at Thorne Industries. And everyone applauded. Daniel placed his hand on Vanessa's bare shoulder and left it there too long. He never looked at me. His mother, Eleanor, sat at my table. A large emerald surrounded by diamonds glittered on her jacket. I recognized the purchase amount immediately because I had seen it that morning in a bank alert. Eleanor touched the brooch and gave me a thin smile. Daniel bought this for me yesterday. He has always been generous to people who support him. Her eyes dropped to my stomach. Some women help men build an empire. Other women become expensive burdens. A few people laughed nervously. I could have exposed all of them right there. I could have said that Vanessa's parents' mortgage had been paid from my protected deployment account. I could have told Eleanor that the jewel on her chest had been purchased with money I earned in places where incoming rockets shook the walls at night. Instead, I took a slow drink of water. Silence was not surrender. Silence gave careless people room to confess. Vanessa came behind my chair later and bent close enough for me to smell her heavy perfume. Daniel says you do clerical work for the government, she whispered. It must be difficult watching him succeed while you sit in a cubicle. Something like that, I said. She smiled and walked away. The truth was classified. Only a few people outside the Pentagon knew that I directed a global logistics program across 3 hostile regions. I had designed the core architecture of Project Vanguard, a military supply system worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Daniel's company was competing for the contract, and because of our marriage, I had formally removed myself from the selection panel. I had spent years keeping my work separate from my home. Daniel had mistaken discretion for insignificance. By 10 o'clock, a hard pulse had begun behind my eyes. My doctor had warned me that my blood pressure was becoming dangerous, so I left the club and drove home alone. Halfway around the beltway, pain tore across my abdomen. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, headlights blurred. Another wave came, sharper than the first, and I felt something warm beneath my dress. I pulled onto the shoulder and called Daniel. The call went to voicemail. I called again, then a third time. Nothing. I dialed emergency services and managed to give the dispatcher the nearest mile marker. My phone slipped from my hand as the world narrowed into a dark tunnel. The last thing I remember was hearing the dispatcher tell me to stay awake. When I opened my eyes again, I was at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. A nurse told me a state trooper had found my vehicle and called for an air ambulance. My blood pressure had risen to a life-threatening level. The surgeons had delivered my twins 6 weeks early. My son and daughter were alive, but both were in the neonatal intensive care unit. The staff had called Daniel throughout the surgery. They had called from my phone, the hospital desk, and the emergency contact number in my medical record. He had answered none of them. For 2 days I drifted between fever, medication, and fear. Every few hours, a nurse helped me into a wheelchair and took me to the neonatal intensive care unit. My babies lay in separate incubators beneath blue, white lights. Their skin looked almost transparent. Tubes covered their faces, and their chests moved with frightening weakness. I named my son Noah and my daughter Grace. I sat between them and promised they would never be abandoned again. On the 3rd morning, Daniel finally came to the hospital. He did not bring flowers. He did not ask to see the twins. He entered wearing a gray suit, placed a leather folder on my bed table, and pulled out a thick packet. "Sign these," he said. They were divorce papers. I stared at his name beneath the formal heading and felt the last fragile part of our marriage go quiet inside me. "Where were you?" I asked. My voice was weak, but it did not shake. "The hospital called you during surgery." Noah stopped breathing twice. Grace needed a transfusion. Daniel sighed as if I were wasting his time. "I was closing the Vanguard deal. I could not leave an important dinner because you had another medical scare. Our children almost died. They are in the best hospital in the country." Clearly, the doctors handled it. He pushed the papers closer. His proposal gave him our house, most of our shared savings, and control of his company shares. It offered me a small settlement if I agreed not to investigate his finances or speak publicly about Vanessa. "You planned this before the gala," I said. "Vanessa and I are done hiding. I want the divorce completed before the contract announcement. Do not embarrass me." I looked at him carefully. "You transferred money from my deployment account." For 1 second, his expression changed. Then arrogance returned. That money was sitting there. It was protected by a military bank lock. "Someone forged my authorization. Her parents were losing their home," he snapped. "My mother deserved something beautiful after everything she did for me. I used the money where it mattered." There it was. Not a full legal confession, but enough to confirm that he knew exactly where the money had come from. "You also bought Eleanor's brooch from that account." He leaned closer. "Prove it." His face was only inches from mine. "You are a paper, pushing nobody, Evelyn. I built our life. I built the company. If you fight me, my lawyers will bury you. Sign the papers, accept what I am offering, and be grateful." He straightened his jacket and walked out. He never asked the babies' names. I waited until his footsteps disappeared. Then I reached beneath my pillow for the secure phone an aide had delivered the previous night. General Thomas Mercer answered on the second ring. "Colonel Shaw," he said. "How are the children?" "Fighting," I replied. "So am I." I explained the bank transfer, the forged authorization, and Daniel's admission. Then I told him something even more serious. Before the gala, I had noticed that Thorne Industries' proposal contained technical language that had never appeared in any public briefing. At first, I had hoped it was coincidence. Now I believed Daniel had stolen restricted Vanguard files from the secure workstation in my home office. I had recused myself to protect the integrity of the contract. My recusal, however, did not prevent me from reporting a crime. Mercer was silent for a moment. "What do you need?" "A sealed financial review, a cyber forensics team, and investigators who can move without alerting Thorne Industries. I can have that started today." "Do it quietly," I said. "If Daniel realizes we are watching him, he will destroy the hardware." After the call, I contacted my military attorney. I gave her the unsigned divorce packet and asked her to protect the children, preserve our assets, and document Daniel's abandonment. Then an alarm sounded from the NICU monitor connected to my room. A red warning flashed beside Noah's name. I forgot Daniel. I forgot the money in the contract. I pressed the call button and tried to stand, tearing an IV from my hand in my panic. By the time I reached the incubator, 3 doctors surrounded my son. I watched through the glass while they helped him breathe. That was the moment revenge stopped being about my pride. Daniel had endangered the future of my children, stolen the work of people who trusted me, and treated national security like a ladder to wealth. I did not want to hurt him in anger. I wanted the truth to reach every part of his life that had been built on a lie. The next 6 weeks divided my life into 2 worlds. In the first world, I was simply a mother. I sat beside Noah and Grace through long nights. I learned how to slide my hands through the incubator openings and touch them without disturbing the wires. I celebrated every ounce they gained and held my breath whenever an alarm sounded. I whispered stories about the home we would build together, even when I was not certain they could hear me. In the second world, I was Colonel Evelyn Shaw. While the twins slept, I worked from a secure laptop in a private hospital office. A small team from Army Criminal Investigations, the Defense Criminal Investigative Service, and Federal Financial Enforcement reported directly to General Mercer. I did not control their conclusions, and I made sure every warrant and subpoena passed through independent legal review. Daniel would never be able to claim that a bitter wife had manufactured the case. We followed the evidence. It was worse than I expected. Daniel had copied early Vanguard design files from my home workstation months earlier. He had paid a technology consultant to remove classification markings and replace my development code name with a Thorne Industries label. He then presented the system as his company's original product. The metadata remained buried in the source files. So did a digital signature linked to my secure credentials. Investigators traced the money from my deployment account through two shell companies. A part of it paid Vanessa's parents' mortgage. Part paid for Eleanor's brooch. Another portion covered the deposit on an Aston Martin Daniel had shown off online. We also discovered payments to a civilian contracting liaison. Daniel had been bribing him for internal schedules, scoring information, and early access to competitors' proposals. Vanessa was involved in almost every transaction. She had created false consulting invoices and recorded some payments as emergency logistics expenses. Eleanor had received several warnings from the bank about the source of her gift, but she told the jeweler to complete the sale anyway. While investigators assembled the case, Daniel moved Vanessa into our house. She posted photographs from my kitchen. She wore a silk robe from my closet and posed beside the fireplace with the caption, "Finally home." Daniel sent my attorney messages demanding that I remove my personal belongings before he threw them away. I did not respond. The house had been purchased partly with my premarital savings. A judge issued a temporary order preventing Daniel from selling it or removing property. My attorney also obtained temporary sole custody because Daniel had not visited the twins, contributed to their care, or answered the hospital's requests. His pride made him reckless. He assumed silence meant I was defeated. One rainy afternoon, the neonatologist smiled as she entered the ICU. "They are ready," she said. And Noah and Grace had reached safe weight markers. Their lungs were stronger. After 43 days, I could take them home. I cried so hard that the nurse cried with me. The General Mercer arranged a secure residence in Northern Virginia while the investigation continued. I fastened the twins into their car seats and stood in the hospital parking garage with my hand on each carrier. For the first time since the gala, I felt hope without fear attached to it. Then my secure phone vibrated. Mercer's message was brief. The Daniel had persuaded the corrupt liaison to move the Vanguard signing to 8 o'clock the next morning. The first access credentials and advance payment would be released as soon as the agreement was executed. We had planned to serve warrants 2 days later, after the final forensic copy of Thorn Industries' servers was complete. Now we did not have 2 days. If the contract was signed, Daniel could gain temporary access to operational logistics data. Even if we froze the money, the security damage could spread beyond his company. We needed to stop the signing and seize the devices at the same time. I called Mercer. "The twins come first," he said before I could speak. "Stay with them. We can handle the room." I looked at Noah and Grace sleeping beneath their blankets. Part of me wanted never to leave them again. But Project Vanguard was my responsibility, and Daniel's theft had made the final confrontation mine. "Put the protection team at the safe house," I said. "Have my uniform brought there. I will meet you at 0700. That night, after the twins were settled, I opened Daniel's divorce papers one last time. At the bottom of the proposed agreement, he had left a yellow tab beside the line for my signature. I wrote nothing. I placed the packet back in its envelope and set it beside my uniform. By morning, he would understand which document had truly decided his future. The Pentagon Annex conference room was designed to make people feel small. A long mahogany table filled the center. American and military flags stood behind the chairperson's seat. Security officers guarded both entrances, and every electronic device had to be registered before the meeting. Daniel sat near the head of the table with a black fountain pen in his hand. Vanessa sat behind him wearing a pale suit and a diamond bracelet that had once belonged to me. 2 contracting officials reviewed the final pages. Daniel smiled. "Project Vanguard will transform military logistics. Thorn Industries is proud to deliver a system created entirely by our own team." He lowered the pen. "Do not sign that document." My voice carried across the room before the door closed behind me. Daniel looked up with open irritation. Then he saw my uniform. I wore army dress blues with the silver eagles of a colonel on my shoulders. My service ribbons covered 3 rows above my left pocket. A General Mercer entered behind me with federal investigators and military police. Daniel's pen fell onto the table. Vanessa stared at my rank. "What is this?" I walked to the opposite end of the table. "I am Colonel Evelyn Shaw, Chief Architect of Project Vanguard and Deputy Director for Strategic Logistics Oversight." Daniel's face lost all color. "No," he said. "You work in administration." "That was the explanation you invented, because you never listened when I spoke." The senior contracting officer closed the agreement and moved it out of Daniel's reach. I continued. "Thorn Industries' security clearance has been suspended. This procurement is terminated pending criminal review." An investigator placed a warrant on the table. At the same moment, other teams were entering Daniel's headquarters, his accountant's office, and the storage facility that held his backup servers. Daniel stood so quickly that his chair fell backward. Evelyn, wait, whatever she told you, Vanessa handled the financial side. Vanessa turned toward him. You said she could never trace it. The room became perfectly still. Daniel realized what she had said and pointed at her. She is lying. I opened a folder and placed one page over the unsigned contract. It showed the registration record for Vanguard's original architecture and the audit trail from the stolen files. You copied my work, I said. You removed the labels, but you did not remove the underlying signatures. You tried to sell my own system back to the department that commissioned it. His eyes moved across the page. We are married, he said. Anything in that house was shared property. Marriage does not turn restricted military data into corporate property. It also does not make my protected deployment account yours. One of the investigators stepped forward and read the charges under the warrant: wire fraud, identity theft, theft of government property, bribery, unlawful access to protected systems, and conspiracy. The officers moved toward Daniel. His confidence collapsed all at once. Evelyn, please, he said. Think about our family. It was the first time he had used that word since the twins were born. Our family was in an operating room while you turned off your phone. The officers secured his wrists. Vanessa backed toward the wall. When an investigator asked her to place her phone on the table, Daniel suddenly twisted free of one officer and grabbed her arm. He pulled her in front of him and tried to reach the side door. Vanessa screamed. He made it 2 steps. Military police forced him to the floor and restrained him. In his panic, he had added attempted escape and assault to an already devastating case. Vanessa looked down at him with pure hatred. I recorded everything, she said. Every meeting, every transfer. Every time you told me I would take the blame if this failed. Daniel stared at her as if she had struck him. You recorded me. I knew you would sacrifice me eventually. Investigators led her into a separate room. Before the day ended, she requested an attorney and offered to cooperate. Daniel remained on the floor for a moment, his cheek pressed against the carpet, his expensive suit wrinkled beneath the officer's knees. He looked at me. You planned this? No, I said. You planned every part of it. I only made sure the truth arrived before your signature did. As they lifted him to his feet, General Mercer handed me Daniel's fountain pen. I looked at it, and then placed it beside the blank signature line. The contract that was supposed to make him untouchable had never been signed. The divorce papers waiting at my attorney's office would be. Daniel's arrest was only the beginning. Vanessa accepted a cooperation agreement. She gave investigators encrypted messages, false invoices, offshore account numbers, and more than 20 hours of recordings. On several of them, Daniel described exactly how he had forged my authorization and copied Vanguard files. He had also spoken about a foreign broker who promised to buy a second version of the system after the government contract was approved. That discovery changed the case from a corrupt procurement scheme into a national security investigation. For months, I balanced motherhood, recovery, and work. I refused to participate in decisions about Daniel's prosecution beyond providing evidence and testimony. Justice had to be lawful, or it was only another form of abuse. The investigators followed the foreign payments through 3 countries. They arrested the broker during a controlled exchange and recovered a server containing stolen information from other defense companies. Project Vanguard was rebuilt on a clean network, and every compromised credential was replaced before the system became operational. Daniel's empire disappeared piece by piece. The government froze the accounts connected to the fraud. Thorn Industries lost its clearance and entered bankruptcy. The Aston Martin was seized. The money taken from my deployment account was restored through forfeiture and bank insurance. Eleanor's emerald brooch was confiscated as evidence. She avoided prison after admitting that she had ignored warnings about the purchase, but she paid a large penalty and sold her home to settle civil claims. The woman who had called me a burden learned that stolen luxury always sends a bill. Vanessa pleaded guilty to conspiracy and fraud. Her cooperation reduced her sentence, but it did not erase it. Her parents sold the house she had saved. Because the mortgage payoff had come from stolen funds, Daniel refused every reasonable plea offer. He insisted that a jury would see him as a visionary betrayed by jealous women. The jury saw the bank records, the source code history, the recordings, and the hospital call log. They convicted him on nearly every count. At sentencing, his attorney asked the judge for mercy because Daniel was the father of premature twins. I watched the judge study him. Being a father is not a title used when convenient, she said. It is a duty. The evidence shows that, when your family and your country trusted you, you chose greed. Daniel received a long federal sentence, followed by supervised release. The court ordered restitution and permanently barred him from federal contracting. Our divorce was finalized soon afterward. My attorney placed Daniel's original proposal beside the final order. He had once demanded the house, my savings, and my silence. Instead, I received sole custody, the control of my separate property, and a clean legal end to the marriage. The colonial house was sold, and the lawful portion of the proceeds went into trusts for Noah and Grace. I did not celebrate with champagne. I went home, warmed 2 bottles, and sat on the nursery floor between my children. For a while, peace felt unfamiliar. I still woke when the house creaked. I checked the locks twice and watched every monitor as if an alarm might sound. Healing did not happen on the day Daniel was arrested. It happened slowly, through ordinary mornings when no one insulted me, the ordinary evenings when I did not have to defend the truth, and ordinary nights when my children slept safely. I learned to stop confusing endurance with love. I had stayed quiet in my marriage because I believed patience could protect the person Daniel might become. In reality, my silence had protected the person he already was. The silence that helped an investigation was strategic. The silence I had used to survive at home was fear. Those were not the same thing. 3 years after the trial, I was promoted to Brigadier General. Project Vanguard helped deliver medicine, equipment, and emergency supplies to service members in dangerous regions. The system Daniel tried to steal became something larger than either of us. Noah grew into a thoughtful boy who took apart every toy to learn how it worked. Grace became fearless, curious, and determined to win every argument. They knew their father had made serious choices and lived far away. I promised myself that, when they were old enough to ask for the full truth, I would answer without bitterness. I would not hand them my anger as an inheritance. 7 years passed. By then, Daniel had served his sentence and been released under strict supervision. I knew because my attorney sent one short notice. I read it, filed it, and went back to making breakfast. I thought that was the last page of our story. Then, on an autumn afternoon in Washington, I saw him again. The leaves along the National Mall were bright red and gold that afternoon. I had just left a Senate hearing and was walking with 7-year-old Noah and Grace toward a small cafe. They held one of my hands each and tried to step on every crunchy leaf along the path. I wore civilian clothes, but beneath my camel-colored coat was the silver star of my rank. The hearing had confirmed me to lead a new cybersecurity and global logistics task force. It had been one of the proudest days of my career. At a crosswalk, the signal turned red, and we stopped. Across the street, a man in a faded hotel uniform swept wet leaves from the entrance of a budget motel. His shoulders were bent. His hair had turned gray, and the confidence that once filled every room had vanished. It was Daniel. He looked up. Our eyes met. The broom slipped from his hands and struck the pavement. He stared at me, then at the twins. Noah was laughing. Grace was explaining why she deserved the larger cookie. They were strong, healthy, and surrounded by a life Daniel had chosen to abandon. A gust of wind opened my coat. Sunlight flashed on the silver star. Daniel's face changed. I saw regret, shame, and the sudden understanding of everything he had thrown away. He took one uncertain step toward the curb and opened his mouth. I felt no victory. That surprised me. For years, I had imagined that justice would feel like watching him suffer. But real freedom did not feel hot or triumphant. It felt quiet. He no longer had the power to change my heartbeat. The walk signal turned white. I squeezed my children's hands and stepped forward. Daniel called my name once. I did not stop. Grace looked across the street. "Mom, who was that man?" I looked down at her, then at Noah. "Someone who made choices a long time ago," I said. "And we are going to keep walking." We crossed beneath the falling leaves and entered the sunlight on the other side. I did not look back. That is the story of how my husband stole my combat pay, abandoned our premature twins, and tried to build a fortune from a military system I created. It is also the story of how evidence, patience, and lawful action brought down his company, exposed everyone who helped him, and returned my life to me. The lesson I carried forward was simple: silence can be powerful when it gives you time to think, to gather proof, and protect yourself. But silence should never become permission for someone to abuse you. Strength is not pretending pain does not exist. Strength is facing the truth, asking for help, and choosing the next right action even when your hands are shaking. Revenge would have been destroying Daniel because I hated him. Justice was allowing his own choices to destroy the lies around him while I protected my children and rebuilt my future. If you are living through betrayal, remember this: you do not have to win every argument in the moment. Protect your safety. Preserve the truth. Find people you trust. Let facts speak where anger cannot. Thank you for watching and staying with me until the end. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. I would truly like to know what you would have done in my place. Daniel once believed my silence meant I was powerless. In the end, my silence was only the sound of a door closing, and when I walked through it with my children, I never looked back.